Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the March 23rd hearing of the Zoning Hearing Board. Give me one moment here. So just to begin, I just want to remind everybody that this is an e-hearing as permitted by Act 15 of 2020. So tonight's hearing is not only available through this platform, through the phone, it's also available on the township's website, that's uppergwynedd.org, and on Facebook Live. And if you're on the township's website, you just have to look in the news section for the link. If you're on a mobile device, you might have to click news in order to view the link. If you would like to participate in public comment later, you will be able to. You'll just have to call through the number. If you just want to watch or listen to the public hearing, you can certainly do so through the township website or through Facebook Live in addition. And a couple of other things, I would ask that anybody who's participating through this platform, please stay muted when you're not speaking. And all applicants for tonight's hearing were notified in advance and provided instructions on how to participate electronically. Applicants were also requested to provide copies of any exhibits they intend to use so that they could be put on the township's website. And I would ask that if any applicant tonight introduces an exhibit that was not previously provided and not made available on the township's website, that they just make a note of this so that the board and the public are aware. The Zoning Hearing Board has required that all applicants and their witnesses participate in tonight's hearing using both audio and visual capabilities. Anyone wishing to be a party to the proceedings is also invited to participate using both audio and visual capabilities. For those who only wish to provide public comment, like I said, you can participate via audio, and at the public comment time, you can just go ahead and state your comments on the application after stating your name and address for the record. So to get started, our first and only hearing for the evening is hearing number 20-07, and that's Carmichael Associates LP of 404 North Sumneytown Pike, Suite 200, North Wales, Pennsylvania, 19454, for properties located at 779 Sumneytown Pike and 783 Sumneytown Pike, for a variance from section 195-12.A to permit 17 townhomes on the properties with 60 parking spaces in accordance with a site plan revision 1 dated January 14th, 2021, which site plan is available for review and inspection at the Upper Gwynedd Township Municipal Office. The applicant is also requesting any associated zoning relief for the proposed 17 townhouses as it relates to dimensional requirements as shown on the site plan, including relief from internal side yard setbacks between adjoining townhouses. The applicant is further requesting a variance from section 195-60 to extend the period to obtain a building permit for any approved zoning relief from 1 year to 2 years. The properties are zoned R2 residential. So now I want to go ahead and ask, would the applicant please identify themselves for the record and any counsel who's here for the applicant?
Bernadette Kearney here from Hamburg Rubin on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you.
Chris Canavan, President WB Homes and Senior Vice President Carmichael Associates LP.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, I'm back off of you. Okay. And is anyone here representing the township this evening?
Good evening, Greg Kaleniak from Rudolph Clark on behalf of the township.
Okay, thank you. And are there any other individuals requesting party status this evening? Okay. So hearing none, Mr. Hitchens, could you please mark any board exhibits at this time? You're on mute.
Certainly. So as is our usual custom, I'm going to mark the following exhibits as board exhibits at this time. The first one, ZHB1, is going to be a proof of publication. This is the legal notices for tonight's hearing. ZHB2 is going to be a copy or a verification of posting of the property for tonight's hearing. ZHB3 is going to be a copy of the township's website and the notice that was provided on the township's website for tonight's hearing. ZHB4 is going to be a copy of the application submitted by the applicant dated May 15th, 2020 with a one-page attachment. And just to be clear, this is the one-page attachment that lists the two addresses at the top and then going down to the third paragraph, starting with the applicant is proposing 17 townhomes on the consolidated property as shown on the attached plan. I make this note for the record because the applicant did submit a prior application, which is, I believe, a part of exhibits that the applicant intends on introducing, but just so that the board is aware and the public is aware, for the board exhibits, the application before you tonight is the one that I'm marking as ZHB3. I'm sorry, ZHB4. ZHB5 is going to be a copy of the parcel map with the two addresses for the mailed notice that was sent to the neighboring property owners. ZHB6 is going to be a copy of the zoning plan prepared by Bowler Engineering, dated May 11th, 2020, last revised January 14th, 2021. Again, this is the plan depicting the 17 townhomes that I referenced in the ZHB4 application. Additionally, the board did receive a written comment, and my apologies, I'm trying to find it, which I'm going to mark as ZHB6, which I would recommend we read during the public comment section when that time comes.
Do we want to mark that as ZHB7?
ZHB7, thank you, Mr. Connolly.
Okay, thank you. All right, so let's go ahead and do any witnesses need to be sworn in at this time?
Yes, Mr. Connolly, Mr. Hitchens, I have Chris Canavan, John Kennedy, and Ron Kloss who are going to testify.
Okay, Mr. Manjordi, would you be able to swear them in?
Please raise your right hands. You solemnly swear the testimony about to give in these proceedings will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. You do so swear?
I do.
I swear.
Thank you. If I can have each of your names starting with Chris.
Christopher Canavan, Canavan.
Thank you.
Kennedy.
Thank you.
Ronald Kloss, last name spelled Klos.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
And Mr. Hitchens, just to give a little background, because yes, we did supply a exhibit booklet, and I marked it exhibit tabs 1 through 12, and also marked in the lower right-hand corner page numbers so that we can show it on the screen. And I believe Mr. Connolly would be in charge of that, I think. So yes, there we go. Yes. And just to give a little bit of background, because as you indicated, Mr. Hitchens, on the first exhibit, if you go to pages 4. Yeah, the first exhibit, or I'm sorry, the first application we put in was from 2020, and that attachment referenced the 24 apartment units. We then did an indefinite extension, which is on page 9, and then we did an amendment with the revised attachment that Mr. Hitchens has marked referencing the 17 townhomes, and that is on pages 11 and 12. So as we have finally gotten to the zoning hearing board, it's been several years, and so that's why it's a little, the time period is a lot between when we filed in 2020 and we're finally before you in 2021, is that originally we had asked for the apartment units, and now we're switching to the townhome units. And also Mr. Heleniak had called, and I did indicate that in the original zoning application, we had asked for a validity variance. We have withdrawn that, and indicated to Mr. Heleniak that I would make that clear at this hearing. Yes, the validity variance has been withdrawn. So as indicated earlier, what we're asking for relief for is a use variance for residential use townhomes in the R2 zoning districts on the property shown, 779 Town Pike and 783 Town Pike, and relief to allow the dimensional criteria to apply to those townhome units. So for example, the setbacks, you wouldn't have setbacks between attached housing, so we would need relief for that. And Mr. Kloss will go over that. And with that, I'm going to start with Mr. Canavan, and we can, if we could go to exhibit tab 13, yeah, page 13 on the exhibit tabs. And you'll see the plan that Mr. Kloss had. Yep, there we go. Yes, there we go. We can see the plan that is before the board tonight. So Chris, I just have to find you on my screen. Hold on one second. There you are. Can you explain who you are in relation to the applicant?
Absolutely. My name is Chris Canavan. I am president of WB Homes, and we are a local home builder with offices directly in front of the Upper Gwynedd Township building. Carmichael Associates LP is the equitable owner of the properties described, 779 and 783 Town Pike. And we are the applicant for this application. We are using Carmichael Associates LP as a development limited partnership for this project. The agreement of sale, I believe, was enclosed in the application to prove our equitable stake in this property and allowing us to move forward with this application.
Yes, that's on page 18. And the agreement of sale for the properties remains in effect, correct?
That is correct.
And that's a redacted copy of the agreement of sale.
Correct.
And can you give a bit of background? I explained that we had filed the original zoning application in 2020 and are here before the board in 2021. We had originally requested 24 apartment units. And why don't you explain what happened that we are now in front of the zoning hearing board for 17 townhomes?
I will keep this as brief as I can so as not to bore the board. However, this property has a extended history with multiple applications that date back many years. Our company became involved in 2017, worked with the township and the township staff on some alternatives, even in an overlay zoning district for the property. That did not move forward in the way that it was intended. So we did seek variance before the zoning hearing board for 24 apartments. We had looked at multiple uses for this property to try to come up with a transition use from Town Pike, with obviously Merck being directly across the street from us, an institutional assisted living facility to the east of us, multiple commercial uses to the west of us on Town Pike, but sensitive to the fact that there is single family homes directly to the rear and the back corner of our property. We were trying to come up with a property and a use that would be a transition, but also sensitive from a height, from a development standpoint. The 24 apartments were designed as 2 buildings, garden style, 2-story buildings. We, prior to coming to the zoning hearing board under the first application, we hosted a meeting of the neighbors via Zoom, took feedback on the project, and it was made clear to us that based on the feedback from the neighbors, there are some real concerns about rental property. There was concern with regards to the development of the site and the way that we had intended. There was also concern with buffering. There was concern with how we would, sort of create fencing and other barriers between the 2 properties as well. Based on that feedback, we reconsidered what our application would look like for the property and decided to move forward rather than with a rental community to come up with an owner-occupied option for the property, which would be the 17 townhomes that are before the zoning hearing board this evening. These units are similar in scale and nature to townhomes we built around the corner off of Allentown Road in the Sturbridge Village development. They are 2-story townhomes, 1,900 to 2,100 square feet. All of them are 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath with a 4th bath option. They all have a 1-car garage with the possibility of a 2-car garage for end units. They will have basements. They live and feel like a real nice high-end townhome, and I think they are, from a scale standpoint, a very good transition between the 5-lane roadway that is Sumneytown Pike and the single-family homes that are to the rear of the property. Our goal and commitments we have made in some of the discussions would be to put up a 6-foot-high fence along the whole rear property line with the adjacent single-family residential, along with utilizing the 50-foot rear yard setback buffer to enhance the vegetation and provide additional screening and landscaping buffer in that area. In addition, we've designed the project in such a way so as to minimize the number of curb cuts that are on Sumneytown Pike. That was one of the reasons we are seeking another use on here. It does not make sense to put a whole bunch of additional driveways onto Sumneytown Pike within this area. The township has worked very hard to try to manage congestion and traffic in this area. So our proposal provides for 1 curb cut. There's existing 2 curb cuts for this property right now, so we would reduce it to 1 to provide access then for an interior court for drive access to the townhomes. We would extend the sidewalk across the frontage of the property to connect to the existing sidewalk on Sumneytown Pike. And then we would be looking at doing landscaping, berming, and other features to create an attractive single streetscape along Sumneytown Pike for our whole frontage to sort of provide a buffer for the residential use to Sumneytown Pike, but also a buffer from Sumneytown Pike to the residential use. So that would be the design that we have come up with to try to, again, act as a transition zone. I think Mr. Kennedy, who will testify after me, will discuss the planning objectives here, but it's really a transition use from what is Sumneytown Pike, 5-lane roadway, commercial district, to the single-family homes to the rear.
And if we could go to page 50.
That would be the very last one, Mark, if you need that.
It is the very last one.
There we go.
There we go. And Chris, can you explain, this is exhibit tab 12 in the booklet, page 50. Can you explain what it is that we're seeing here?
These are a rendering of a townhome community we are currently building that are reflective of what we would intend to build on this property. This is a 5-unit townhome building. The 2 end units, while you see 1-car garages here, can also have 2-car garages. They lose a den at a garage. But this would be very similar to that. It has a, appropriate jogs, if you will, of the elevation. They're, I think, very attractive townhomes. We've attempted to use these to blend in with the overall flavor of the architecture within Upper Gwynedd within this area.
And if we could go back to page 13, which is the plan. Yeah. And so, Chris, you were talking about, and it's a little hard to see on my screen, but you may be able to see it on your screens, the setback from the neighborhood in the rear.
Yes, I think what we have shown here is the outer setback of all of the buildings, rear, side, and front, is honoring the R2 required setbacks for front, rear, and side yard. Mr. Kloss will get into that further. So you'll see the dashed line to the rear of the units is a 50-foot rear yard setback. The units are not set on the rear yard setback. They're closer to 75 to 79 feet from the rear yard setback, which is the second line you see there. But that area within the 50-foot rear yard setback, it would be an area that we would protect to preserve what existing vegetation is worth preserving in that area, and then supplementing that with additional landscaping and buffering along with a fence along the property line. One other item that I would note that was of concern for many of the neighbors is stormwater management. As with any development, stormwater management is a concern. And our plan would be to install underground stormwater detention basins to the front of the site underneath part of the parking lot and in that front yard setback area to manage the stormwater on this site. And in addition, look at managing, there appears to be some off-site drainage that occurs from the assisted living facility, institutional use, to our northeast that may run through part of our property and the neighboring property. And part of our design would be to work with the township engineer to see if there's any way we can address any drainage that may be leaving our site from there that may impact some of the neighboring properties. But that would be something we'd be able to handle during the subdivision land development process if we are successful with this application this evening.
And again, we see on this plan, the single access drive, it's sort of between lots 5 and 6.
That is correct. And we picked that area. If you're familiar with it, you can see it on Town Pike. To the very east property line, there is a curve in Town Pike that's heading towards the traffic signal at Allentown Road. So we wanted to pick a site that would provide appropriate site distance around that curve in a straight area for people coming and going from the development.
And then on the back of the units that are numbered 1 through 17, you see a little square. Can you explain what that might be?
That'd be a deck, patio deck.
Okay. And can you explain, will an HOA be formed for this community?
Yes, the way that these properties will be owned is it's called a planned unit development. The individuals will only own the footprint of their building. The community association will be responsible for all landscape maintenance, all of the common driveway, parking area maintenance, the common sidewalk along Town Pike. So really the unit owners will only be responsible for their driveway and their service walk to their front door, along with their deck to the rear. But what that does is we'll have one trash collector coming through there. You have a consistency of maintenance for the long term of all of the exterior elements of the property, along with restrictions on architectural control so that the units will stay looking the way they look when we build them, rather than having people paint them different colors, change facades, etc. And, you know, it provides a good, consistent, higher quality finish for the overall project.
And it would also mean that the 50-foot setback, people wouldn't be putting items back there.
Yeah, we restrict the, you know, those are not backyards for people. That is not, you know, there are not trampolines, above ground pools, things of that nature. They're not allowed under the association documents. You may have people on their back deck. They may have temporary things put off their deck, but they have to go back in the end of the evening.
And how did you determine 17 townhomes?
When we evaluated what would work within the building setback, so that we didn't violate the 20 and the side yard, rear yard, and front yard setbacks, we were looking at something that was less than the 24 units that we had proposed for the apartments, that was economically viable for the project, to make sure that we could install all the buffering and other improvements that we promised, and then looked at generally what the densities were for townhomes in the area, you know, whether it's the development on the north side or the west side of Broad Street on Town Pike or our Sturbridge Village. And that's the 17 seem to fit within all of those guidelines.
That's all the questions I had of Mr. Canavan.
Okay, does anybody on the board or does the township have any questions?
We have one public comment. Give me one moment. I will move him in.
Mr. Hitchens, do we want to wait until the end to do public comment, or do we want to have public comment after each witness?
So, Mr. Connolly, I would recommend that unless a person has party status, you would limit the questions to those who have party status, which at this point would be the township, and obviously open it up to the board to ask questions and save all public comment for the end of the proceeding, as we would in any other case.
Okay, and I agree with that. So at this point, I guess we can wait to do public comment until after all the presentations are over. Does anybody, like I said, does the township have any questions at this point for this witness?
The township has no questions. Thank you.
Does anybody on the board have any questions for this witness? Mr. Hitchens, do you have any questions for this witness?
I have no questions for this witness. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Beaker, any questions? Anyone?
No. Nothing from me, Mark. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Canavan.
Thank you, Mr. Connolly. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And then our next witness will be John Kennedy. And John, can you just state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Sure. My name is John H. Kennedy, Kennedy. I am the principal and owner of Kennedy and Associates, planners and land use consultants located in Harleysville.
And we've attached your CV as Exhibit Tab 6. It's pages 21 through 28. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And can you just briefly describe what you do?
Sure. I'm a professional land planner. I've practiced land planning for the last 41 years, the last 31 of which have been in my own consulting firm. I have a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Design. I'm a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners, the American Planning Association, Pennsylvania Planning Association. I'm also a member of the Lower Southford Planning Commission and the Montgomery County Transportation Authority.
And can you just briefly describe some examples of types of projects you've worked on in the past?
Sure, we work on a wide variety of projects, including large residential properties of several hundred units, smaller infill sites. We get involved in individual site plan design itself, and then we also get involved in writing zoning ordinances, also project administration, approval of projects, and such.
And have you previously testified before municipal bodies in Montgomery County?
I have many, including Upper Gwynedd. I think I've done at least 2 sign cases in front of this board and 1 conditional use in front of the commissioners.
And have you previously been accepted as an expert witness before municipal bodies in Montgomery County?
Yes, I have.
And I'd like to offer John as an expert in land planning.
Do we have any objections to accepting him as an expert witness? Okay, I don't hear any, so yeah, go ahead. You're accepted as an expert witness here.
Thank you. John, are you familiar with the property that's the subject of the hearing?
Yes, I am.
And have you been retained by the applicant to represent it for purposes of this application?
Yes, I have been.
And can you describe what are the properties zoned?
The property is zoned R2 residential, which is approximately a half-acre zoning district.
And where are the properties located?
The property is made up of 2 parcels, which are located on the north side of Town Pike, in between Broad Street and Allentown Road. It's located on the north side of the road, across from Merck.
And actually, if we could go to Exhibit Tab 48, that while John's describing, page 48, it's Exhibit Tab 11. And John, this is, oh, I'm sorry. This is an aerial of the property?
Yes, it is. This is an aerial. There's a push pin located on the property, and diagonally going from the upper left to the lower right is Town Pike. In the center bottom of the photograph, we can see Merck, the buildings in the parking lot of Merck.
And what's currently on the property?
Currently, right now, the property has 2 derelict houses, which are vacant.
And if we could go to Exhibit Tab 45, it's just a few pages back. Yes, we're going to start with this one. And what uses surround the property, John? And I think you've created an exhibit, and can you describe that?
Yes, one of the things that's important, I think, with any kind of zoning case, whether it be a variance or a rezoning, is to take a look at the context of the site and catalog what the surrounding uses are in the property. Quite often, the surrounding uses do not necessarily align with the zoning map. And there are some cases that we see of that here. But we have the site highlighted in with a blue outline. And then what we have done is gone through and cataloged all the surrounding uses, generally going from South Broad Street over to Allentown Road. And those are keyed in letters around the property. So Town Pike is it's a major road. As Chris said, it is a 5-lane road at this point. It's a regional thoroughfare and carries a considerable amount of traffic not only to this particular segment of the corridor, meaning especially Merck, but it also carries a lot of pass-through traffic. The Pennsylvania Turnpike is not that far away, further to the west. So starting directly across the street, that's what most people are probably the most familiar with. We have Merck. It's primarily the parking lot, one of the parking lot areas of Merck. And then going west from there, we have there's a branch bank, a Wells Fargo branch bank, a Marathon gas station, an auto service station on the corner, jumping across catty corner across Broad Street. We have an office building, and then which is noted with the letter E. F would be a CVS pharmacy, and as we come back closer to the property, we have Dunkin' Donuts and Kiefer's Appliance, and then one of our direct neighbors is which is it is a single family house, but it's a rather large dental office. You can see from the large parking lot in the aerial. Continuing past the site, we have institutional uses, Gwynedd Healthcare, and then as we get to Allentown Road, there is some vacant land owned by a couple of different entities. And then going directly behind the property, we have 3 single-family homes which are existing that are also zoned R2. And kind of wrapping around part of the back, we also have a portion of the Gwynedd Healthcare. So one of the things that this tells us from a planning standpoint is it's not really what I would characterize as a residential area. The corridor itself has a variety of uses, including standard commercial, sort of the industrial pharmaceutical use, and then also institutional uses. And I think that's one of the reasons why you find 2 vacated homes on the property. They simply, as the road grew up, it was just not an acceptable place to have a single family home.
And then if you could turn to page 46, it's the next page. And Don, if you could describe what shows up on the screen there. Yes, the second page of Exhibit 10.
This is a little bit more of a kind of a granular look at what is exactly around the property. This is what is exactly adjoining the property. And again, starting across the street, we have Merck, which is classified as an industrial type use. To the left, we have the family dentistry office, which would be a medical office type use. Up above the property, we can see the 3 single family lots, which are residential. And then to the right and wrapping around the rear of the right portion of the site, we have the institutional use of the Gwynedd Healthcare. So what we've also done is kind of break down what the percentages are. And again, one of the things that this shows is that there is not one dominant land use that completely surrounds this area. It really has a multitude of different land uses located around it.
And again, can you describe what the applicant is proposing for the site?
Sure. The applicant is proposing 17 townhomes. I think townhomes probably form a more acceptable transition between some of these adjacent uses. Certainly, it is a transition to the residential lots which are located to the rear, but it also provides a nice transition to Merck across the street, and also the uses on each side. I think if anything, having a residential use is probably, I'm going to say, catering more to the residential uses behind, in the sense that one could make a good argument to put a commercial use here. When you look at the zoning map, everything to the west is zoned commercial. However, that would have a much greater impact on those surrounding neighbors. So I think the fact that it would be a residential use, also when we look at the architecture that's proposed, It's a residential style architecture. There would be gabled roofs, residential type materials. So in that sense, I would have to say that it probably would be a land use that would have the least amount of impact on at least the surrounding neighbors in the back.
And if we could go to, I'm sorry, page 43, just a couple of pages before this, you were referencing the zoning, John, and I did want to indicate that the zoning map is Exhibit Tab 9, a portion of that. And it's a little hard to see on my screen, but I think you could see that we indicated where the 783 and 779 are in the R2.
Correct. When we look at the corridor of Town Pike going from South Broad Street over to Allentown Road, there are really only 3 parcels which are R2, and one of them is the family dentistry business. So the applicant owns the other 2 remaining parcels, but as you can see, the majority of the corridor is filled with either commercial zoning or light industrial zoning or institutional zoning.
And did you review the Upper Gwynedd Township Comprehensive Plan, and what did you conclude from your review?
I did. The comprehensive plan was adopted in 2004. It's a little bit older, and in fact, I did also go back and take a look at some older aerial photographs, because typically we like the comprehensive plan to be about ideally 10 years old. One of the things that it did tell me when I was looking through it and then looking at some older aerials is this corridor has changed quite a bit over the years, as I'm sure all of you are aware as residents. Probably the biggest change was the realignment of Allentown Road, which used to travel almost in a straight direct line towards the rail line, and then it would make an abrupt bend and come down to Town Pike. That was realigned several years ago, I think the very late 90s, if I recall, early 2000, so that it could align with the main entrance of Merck. And at the time, there was also a major expansion of Merck that had taken place. Since that time, we've also seen, you can look at aerials and see that many of the commercial businesses along the way have been filled in. So the township is currently in the process of redoing their comprehensive plan to accommodate for some of these growth factors. I did also look at the Montgomery County plan, comprehensive plan, and that actually characterizes this area, this immediate frontage of Town Pike, as a business center. So even they are thinking of it perhaps maybe a little bit more in terms of a commercial type use.
And John, as Mr. Canavan had indicated in his testimony, at one point, the Board of Commissioners had adopted an ordinance referenced as a Town Pike infill and traffic management overlay district. And if we could go to page 33.
Sure, that is correct.
And that was, as you could see on the page 33, it was ordinance 2018-012, enacted December 17, 2018. And can you describe what this is and what occurred?
Sure. This was an overlay district that was recognizing that there was a need to provide some special regulations for parts of Town Pike, certain corridors. This area in specific seemed to be studied quite a bit. The goal was to try to, number one, improve the overall appearance of the corridor, and also find ways of managing the traffic and the congestion on the corridor. So the goal was to try to minimize the number of curb cuts, for instance, but also try to create uses which would not generate large volumes of traffic. So one example would be to discourage drive-through restaurants that would generate large amounts of traffic. And one of the uses that was in fact contemplated or was included in this, I should say, were multifamily dwellings at 8 units per acre.
And this, although the ordinance was adopted, the no properties were actually put into the overlay district, correct?
That's correct. This was what's called a mapped overlay. So it in theory could be applied anywhere along the Town Pike corridor. However, looking at the zoning map, there are no properties that have this overlay applied on top of them.
Currently.
Currently, that's correct.
Okay. And does the applicant meet the density set forth in this ordinance that you were just referencing?
Yes, as I said, the allowed density in this ordinance would be 8 dwelling units per acre. We are at approximately 5.6 DU per acre based on the net acreage.
And again, if we go back to the aerial, that's page 48. And briefly, John, can you describe what we're seeing on this exhibit tab 11?
Sure. I think probably the best way to describe it is this is really a nice aerial shot of the Town Pike corridor. And what you can see here is how this has really turned into a growth area of the township. It shows a variety of different land uses, as I have pointed out, ranging from commercial to industrial to institutional. It also shows a significant variety of housing just immediately off of the corridor. I can't really point to it, but for instance, at the corner of just to the west of Broad Street and Town Pike, there's a little corridor there. I think it was called Samantha Court, which is a little infill job, R3, that is a collection of townhomes and single family homes together on one court. We also have going up Allentown Road, there are some areas up there which were also R3. One of the roads leading into there, Don Drive, has again a collection of townhomes and single family within the same development. So in that sense, this is not anything which is unusual in the township at all. This is actually the idea of having townhomes adjacent to single family homes is something that we see quite a bit just in this aerial.
And John, can you explain why the R2 zoning does not work for this property?
Sure. R2, if we look at the homes directly behind them, it's a good representation of R2. The minimum lot size is a little bit above 21,000 square feet. The frontage lot width that's required would be 120 feet. It would be a typical suburban type home, usually a 4 or 5 bedroom home. And it would normally be a fairly expensive type of real estate. To locate that on such a busy street is going to be very, very difficult to even successfully sell these homes. This is such a busy road that you would either have to discount the homes severely, which would then really make them much less desirable, or they most likely would end up being rental properties. In addition, it would also cause more disturbance to the traffic flow. You would end up with multiple curb cuts all down the frontage of the property. There's about 525 feet of frontage on the property, and to start to put multiple curb cuts in there would be very disruptive in terms of the traffic flow. So I think to have a solution where there's really just one consolidated curb cut would be much more desirable. Also, the townhouse buildings can be, because of their size and shape, they can be kind of pushed back off the road a little bit. A large buffer area can be preserved behind them. unlike a single family house where people own the lot and may want to do things with it, clear cut it, put sheds up, swimming pools, etc. The existing vegetation would be saved and in fact would be augmented. So even from the Sumney Town Pike side, there would be much less of a visual impact with the proposed townhomes versus if you just cut everything up into single family lots.
And John, is the request for the variance to permit 17 townhomes appropriate for these properties?
In my opinion, it is, yes.
And in your professional opinion as a land planner, is this property suitable for the residential use proposed?
Yes, I think it's an excellent transition use between the single family residential in the rear and the busy road corridor in front.
And in your professional opinion, are there unique physical circumstances or conditions of the property that create an unnecessary hardship for the properties?
Yes, there are. I think it's the simple fact that there's been a tremendous amount of growth and change in the area over the years, and it has greatly changed the character of the overall area, and that does affect the usability of the site.
And in your professional opinion, is the authorization of the requested variance necessary to enable reasonable use of the property in the area where the property is located?
Yes, I think it is.
And in your professional opinion, was the unnecessary hardship created by the owner or the applicant?
No, it was not.
And in your professional opinion, will the requested variance alter the essential character of the neighborhood?
No, I think it would be an excellent addition to the neighborhood and would help stabilize the area, as is evidenced by the two derelict houses on the site right now.
And in your professional opinion, is the requested variance the minimum to afford relief?
Yes, I think it is.
And that's all the questions I had of Mr. Kennedy.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hitchens, I know you had mentioned that one of the individuals who had previously requested party status has now joined the meeting. Did you want to potentially bring that person in?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So at this time, and the applicant is aware, a member of the community had requested in advance of tonight's hearing to obtain party status, which was consistent with the notices that were in fact published. When we commenced the hearing tonight, he had not joined, but during, I believe, the testimony of Mr. Kennedy, he did join, and I believe he is on the call now. His name is Mr. McMullen. Mr. McMullen, are you there?
Yes, I am.
So, Mr. McMullen, are you requesting party status in these proceedings?
I am.
Okay. If you could, Mr. McMullen, could you identify your full name and your address for the record?
James G. McMullen, 1163 Canterbury Drive.
And Mr. McMullen, did you receive any mailed notice with regard to tonight's hearing?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Kearney, do you have any objections to Mr. McMullen's request for party status?
I believe, Mr. McMullen, you are the property owner directly adjacent in the rear of the property?
That is correct, yes.
Then no, Mr. Hitchens, I don't have an objection.
So, Mr. Connolly, it's up to the board if you would like to grant party status. Obviously, the applicant has no objection based off of the location of Mr. McMullen.
Thank you, Mr. Hitchens. Does anyone on the board have any objection to entering Mr. McMullen as a party in this matter?
No objection.
No objection.
Okay, then Mr. McMullen, you are admitted as a party here. But before I do that, well, actually, does anyone from the township have any questions for the witness?
The township has no questions for this witness.
Mr. McMullen, do you have any questions for the witness?
No, I do not.
Okay, I do though have some questions for the witness. If I can open this up here quickly. If the zoning ordinance will cooperate with me. So Mr. Kennedy, it's my understanding that there are potentially 4 uses that are permitted in the R2 residential district. And I know we've discussed single-family detached dwelling, but I just wanted to quickly go over the others and just make sure that in your opinion, this property couldn't be used for any of the others.
Sure.
So one of the potential uses is raising and harvesting of crops, provided that said use shall not exceed an area of 6,000 square feet on any lot. Do you believe that this property could be used for such a use?
I do not think that that would be appropriate for the property.
And then Mr. Kennedy, I believe this property is less than 4 acres in area. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes. It's approximately 3 acres net.
Okay, so, and it looks to me like the other two uses, one of which is educational, religious, or philanthropic use, excluding correctional or penal institution, provided that the minimum lot area shall be 4 acres and the proposal shall conform to section 195-26C, D, and E. Obviously, this property is smaller than that 4 acres, but do you believe this property could be used for that use?
If a variance were granted, that would be a possibility. However, in evaluating the variance, I think that might cause much more of an impact to the surrounding area, and especially the surrounding neighbors, than the proposed 17 townhomes.
Thank you. And there's one other, in golf course and clubhouse, excluding driving range and miniature golf, provided that the minimum lot area shall be 50 acres. Obviously, the lot size of the lot is significantly smaller than 50 acres, but would you agree that this property could not be used for those uses as well?
I would agree.
Okay, so I just want to make sure we had that on record. Does anyone else on the board have any questions for the witness?
I do not.
Mr. Hitchens, do you have any questions for the witness?
I do, Mr. Connolly. If you could you go to page 43 of the applicant's exhibits? Mr. Kennedy, I believe this was marked as one of the applicant's exhibits, which is the zoning map of the surrounding uses. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
And the two parcels are identified in red as 783 and 779 on the map, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And as you would previously testified, that black line that's directly below it, that's Sumneytown Pike, is that correct?
Yes, that is.
And Sumneytown Pike runs along that property through the commercial district to the left, if you're facing the map. And
yes.
then it crosses over to the OC, and then you see the R3 district?
Yes, that's right.
Are you familiar at all with the permitted uses within the R3 district?
Yes, I am.
Do you know, is townhouse use a permitted use within the district?
It is one of the permitted uses, yes.
In your opinion, is that notable that it's along Sumneytown Pike and that townhouses uses would be a permitted within that zoning district?
I think it is. I think it's an example of how the corridor has changed. That's actually a fairly recent change to the zoning map, if I recall. And I think that's a good example of what I'll characterize as a small infill site. So that is one of the illustrations of how the entire corridor has kind of grown up and changed over time.
I have no other questions, Mr. Connolly. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you.
All right, and Ms. Kearney, you have one other witness, correct?
Yes, Mr. Kloss.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm just finding him on my screen. Hold on one second. Oh, there we go. There's Ron. Ron, can you just spell your last name for the record?
Sure. First name is Ron, last name is Kloss, K-L-O-S.
And by whom are you employed?
I'm employed by Bowler Engineering at 1600 Manor Drive in Chalfont, PA.
If we could put up, it's page 31. This is Ron's CV. And Ron, can you please describe what you do for your plant, for your employer?
Sure. I'm a project manager with Bowler Engineering. I've been with Bowler for over 25 years now, working on various projects from small commercial to large office developments to shopping centers to various types of residential projects, townhomes like this, single family homes, multifamily project as well.
And can you explain what the BEE is after your name?
Sure, I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of Pennsylvania and also in New Jersey.
And have you previously testified before municipal bodies in Montgomery County?
I have, yes. As John said, we've been doing this for a long time, so we've been around to several municipalities. Haven't been to Upper Gwynedd for quite some time, but have testified in front of other boards, both zoning and commissioners in Franconia, Upper Providence, Collegeville, Lower Salford, etc.
And have you been accepted as an expert witness before those municipal bodies?
Yes, I have.
And I'd like to offer Ron as an expert in civil engineering.
Does anyone have any objection?
No
I do
objection
not.
from the township.
Any objection from the board?
I do not. This is Jack.
No.
Okay, hearing none, you're accepted as a witness,
Thank you.
expert witness here. Thank you.
And if we could go to page 13. Ron, this is the plan that you prepared, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And are you familiar with the property that's the subject of the hearing tonight?
Yes, I am.
And you've been retained by the applicant to represent it for purposes of this application?
Yes, that's correct.
And you prepared the plan that is marked exhibit tab, I believe it's exhibit tab 3, and which is shown on the screen as page 13, correct?
Yes.
And can you briefly describe the property for the board?
Sure. The plan in front of you, the zoning plan in front of you shows Town Pike at the bottom of the screen. Shows the proposed 17 townhouse units. In addition, as both Chris and John indicated, we are proposing one driveway access to this property on the Town Pike, which all of the units would take access to. There is a proposed 26 parking spaces proposed between the townhouses and Town Pike. In addition, you'll see that each of the units has a driveway, and that driveway is wide enough for 2 cars. So in theory, we have 34 parking spaces in the driveways for each of these units, plus 26 overflow parking spaces, for a total of 60 then parking spaces proposed total on this site.
And I'm not sure if we could do this, but it's very hard to see on the plan. You had listed the zoning required and proposed criteria down in the right-hand corner. I'm not sure if we can zoom in on that. It might make it easier for everyone. Yes, there we go. A little bit easier. Yeah. And can you review the dimensional criteria and how the applicant meets the R2 requirements, or as indicated, we may need some dimensional relief in order to meet the R2 requirements for the 17 townhomes?
Sure. So the minimum lot area is 21,780 square feet. As previously indicated, the net area for this site is roughly 3 acres or 129,853 square feet. So we meet the minimum lot area requirement. We also meet the minimum lot width requirement of 120 feet. This parcel has approximately 534 feet of frontage. With regards to setbacks, we've indicated the perimeter setback requirements on the plan. We show in a dashed line, we show along the frontage, we show a 50-foot building setback. Along each side property lines, we show a 25-foot side yard setback. And along the rear, we show a 50-foot rear yard setback requirement. Our front yard, the closest townhouse to Sumney Town Pike is 101.5 feet, so we're in excess of the 50 feet required. The side yard requirement, we're at 31.5 on one side and 38.8 on the other, so we exceed the 25-foot side yard requirements. And our rear yard setback to the closest unit is 79.1 feet, so we exceed the 50 feet. So in all cases, you can see by visually in the plan itself, the buildings are all within the dashed lines, and you can see on the chart that we meet the setback requirements. The 2-story units would also meet the 35-foot building height requirement, and the maximum building coverage in the R2 is 20%. These buildings in combination with themselves totals about just over 20,000 square feet. So our building coverage is 15.6%. So we are less than the maximum allowable 20% building coverage.
And as I had indicated in the attachment to the zoning hearing board application, obviously the townhomes, the side yard to the other attached townhomes, we couldn't meet because they're attached, correct?
Yes, that is correct. Each of the units are attached, so you don't meet a separation distance there. And I'll note that between units 5 and 6 and 11 and 12, you'll see that the spacing there is 30 feet between each of those. So if each end unit is required to have a 25-foot side yard, then that would be a total 50-foot spacing. So we would not meet it between units 5 and 6 and 11 and 12 as well.
But again, we're taking the R2 dimensional requirements and showing how they are applicable, if applicable, to the townhomes, correct?
Correct, and that's what I indicated, that you'll see on the plan, the dashed lines represent the perimeter setbacks, and we meet all of those perimeter setbacks, and we actually exceed them.
And can you describe, I think you described the distance to Sumney Town Pike. Can you describe the distance to the nearest residential neighbor?
Sure. So John had talked about the residents behind us. So they're primarily to the north, what I'll call the northwest and northeast. The closest resident to building number 1 on the plan is approximately 80 or 85 feet. The closest resident to the northeast, then behind units 1 to 5, is about 100 feet. And then there's a second lot, which is a flag lot off of Canterbury. The building on that flag lot is approximately 150 feet, closest point from our building to their building.
And the applicant will have to proceed through land development, and you'll be present and assisting the applicant proceeding through land development, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And although not really part of a zoning application, oftentimes neighbors have concerns about stormwater. And can you explain how you will address stormwater during the land development phase?
Sure. Chris touched on it a little bit in his testimony, and I'll get into a little bit more of it. But the site generally flows what I'll call from south to north, or from the right side of the plan to the back left corner of the site. And what we would intend to do would be collect as much water from and runoff from the units, the parking area, and place subsurface stormwater management basins in the front of the site. So they would be underneath the existing or the proposed parking fields, and discharge them into Sumney Town Pike, thereby trying to minimize the amount of flow that would be getting to the northern corner of the property, where my understanding is there at times experience some flooding. So again, we would make our best efforts there to bring as much water to the front of the site as we could, to help out and minimize the potential for that flooding that currently occurs.
And can you just briefly explain how landscaping will be handled as part of land development also?
Sure. At the land development level, we would develop a full landscape plan to show how we comply with the township's requirements. Again, as Chris indicated, we would look to supplement some of the existing trees that are along the back property line, The goal would be to minimize the grading behind all of the units so that we're not taking down as many trees. We obviously would have to remove enough to construct the units and to construct some grading around the buildings. But keep that grading as close to the buildings as possible so that any trees that are along that 50-foot rear yard setback, we would try and save as long as they were in good health, and then supplement the landscaping along the back there with some additional landscaping. And then along the front of the property, we have anywhere from 30 to 40 feet between the front curb line of the parking area and the right-of-way of Town Pike. We would provide some berming and some landscaping along there to provide some visual screening from Town Pike to the units themselves.
And will the properties be served by public water and public sewer?
Yes, they would.
And could you just briefly explain the need for the relief to allow a total of 2 years to obtain a building permit?
So typically, the land development process, which not only includes the township's review and approval, but outside agency review and approvals, which would include County Conservation District and in this case, County Highway, could take up to 18 months. So that's why the 18-month date to pull a building permit could be challenging, only because sometimes your outside agency reviews take an extended period of time. So that's why we request a lengthier approval process.
And in current times, that's not unusual to see the request for an extension from 1 year to 2 years.
Correct. That's not unusual. The timeframes over time have lengthened as far as outside agency reviews, unfortunately. So therefore, we like to make that request up front if we can.
And in your professional opinion as a civil engineer, is this property suitable for the residential use proposed that you've shown on your plan?
Yes, as John indicated, this appears to be a logical transition between the single-family residential behind us and the surrounding uses on all sides of us.
And in your professional opinion as a civil engineer, will the requested variances alter the essential character of the neighborhood?
No.
And in your professional opinion as a civil engineer, is the requested variances the minimum to afford relief?
Yes.
And in your professional opinion as a civil engineer, have you exercised sound planning decisions in creating the plan?
Yes, we feel we have.
That's all the questions I had of Ron.
Okay, thank you. Does the township have any questions?
Township has no questions. Thank you.
Mr.
I may have lost audio.
All right. Is he still here or?
Mark, I think we lost you for a second. You might have to repeat that.
Now?
I can hear you, Mark. I can hear you, Bernadette. It's Jack. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, I got your internet is unstable message for a moment. So let me try this again. Mr. McMullen, do you have any questions for the witness? Okay. So hearing none, does anyone on the board have any questions for the witness?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. I apologize. The question for Ron is that my property backs up to the rear, and the amount of trees and different things that Ron alluded to, and keeping the grading in a similar fashion, landscaping, etc. Is there any more of a detailed plan other than just a broad base arrangement or a discussion as to what might be proposed, whether it be fencing, whether it be hedging, whether it be berming, and then the second part is the runoff that we get from the nursing home. that runs pretty much on both our properties, if that's an issue that will be addressed here or addressed by the township.
I know Chris is anxious. I'll jump in real quick and then let Chris talk. Those types of items will be addressed in detail as part of the land development process. So to answer your first part of your question, no, we don't have a plan right now. But if we were to proceed beyond the zoning and get the zoning that we seek tonight, we would move into land development, and it would be at that time that we would address all of the details of what the landscaping is going to look like, how we're handling the stormwater management, how exactly the grading is going to be prepared. And that would all be part of a plan package submitted to the township for their review and approval.
And just to add to that, Mr. McMullen, this is Chris Canavan, and I know you got on a little bit late. In my testimony, I did testify to the fact that we were committed to installing a 6-foot high fence along the whole property line, as we've discussed in previous public meetings, et cetera. And I think the reason we have not designed a landscape plan across the back there is the landscape plan will be part and parcel with how we look to manage some of the stormwater concerns that were raised. And those two will have to be designed in concert with each other. And as we've tried to all along, I'd be happy to meet with you and keep you involved in our process, so that I have been in your backyard. I recognize how wet it can get, and we do want to try to see what we can do to assist in that, and obviously not make it any more of a problem. We don't want to dam that up with certain landscape plannings, et cetera. So I think that's a process we can work through should we get the relief here as part of our engineering for the project.
Okay, thanks, Chris. And once again, just thanks for taking the time to express and meet with us and work with us on this proposed plan.
My pleasure.
That's all I had.
Okay, great. Thank you. Does anyone on the board have any questions for the witness?
This is Barbara McHale. I did have some questions, but they have addressed all of them to my satisfaction. So thank you very much.
This is Jack, and I just had one question. I think it might have been answered, but I want to go back to Ron. You did a really good description on the drainage and the storm drains on the front side, on the Town Pike. Just go back to where the water is running off in the back part of the property. I'm looking on the big map that was sent to me, and I'm looking at the Gwynedd nursing home and the parking lot there. And then I see the houses that seem to go onto Canterbury. Is the water flowing into the parking lot at Gwynedd Manor? What's happening? The opposite way.
It flows the opposite way from the nursing home across our property and then towards the cul-de-sac. So the plan that's up on the screen right now, the upper left corner of the property, that's basically where everything flows to.
Gotcha. So actually the Gwynedd Manor sits higher than you, the nursing home?
Correct.
Okay. I just was looking at topography, and I'm very familiar with the site because I pass it all the time, but I don't know which is higher, which is lower. But you feel as the expert, as do your colleagues, that the drainage that's going to be pushed towards Town Pike into the storm drains there will offset a lot of this. That's my only question.
That's what we'd object to do here. We'd look to pick up as much as we could. So from the building lines forward, that would all be collected in the stormwater management basin there. So it would logically want to be piped to Town Pike.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Connolly, if I can just make one comment, and this is for Mr. Kloss, and that is, in looking at the plan, the date on the plan is incorrect, and it's just a typo, but for the record, it should be corrected. It says it was done in September of 2002 rather than 2020.
Okay, thank you.
We have been working on this a long time, but not quite that long. Thank you.
That's what I thought, but so.
All right, great. Mr. Hitchens.
We were in grade school, Bobby.
Mr. Hitchens, do you have any questions for the witness?
I have no questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Reeker, do you have any questions for the witness?
Mark, nothing further. Thank you.
Okay, all right, well, thank you. Okay, and Ms. Kearney, do you have anything else?
No further witnesses, Mr. Connolly, just a short wrap up, if this is the appropriate time.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to go ahead and give your wrap up, I mean, I can, or if you want to wait until would you rather wait until the other parties give whatever testimony?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, all right, great. So does the township have anything for this evening? Do you have any witnesses or any testimony?
The township has no witnesses to offer. However, the township is here to offer its state that it is in support of this application and all of the relief that has been requested by the applicant from the zoning ordinance.
Okay, great. And Mr. McMullen, do you have any witnesses or testimony this evening?
I do not.
Okay, great. All right. Then I guess should we go ahead and move to public comments? Mr. Hitchens, do you want to read the written comments first, or should somebody read the written comments first?
Yeah, so if I may at this time, before we move to the public comment section first, Ms. Kearney, do you want to move into the evidence, your exhibits A1 through A12?
Yes, if I could move those exhibits into evidence, thank you.
They are, Mr. McMullen, do you have any objection to A1 through A12?
Probably not, no.
Okay, so they are admitted as evidence into the record. And Ms. Kearney, would you prefer to give your summary before public comment or after public comment?
I'll do it after public comment. That's
Okay.
fine.
So with that, then, Mr. Connolly, I was able to locate the two communications that I'm aware of that the township had received prior to tonight's hearing. The first one was a written comment, or I should say written questions that were submitted to the township. This is by an email from Maureen Karshner, that's Karchner. This is via email dated March 23rd, 2021. So that was today. The subject matter is dated, the subject matter reads JEPI property questions, and it reads as follows. 1, do you feel that that if this zoning change occurs, it opens up the rezoning on the 11-acre property on Allentown Road? Will it be hard to hold in court the R1 1 acre going forward if JEPI goes to R8? 2, Merck owns the Allentown Road property, but Merck owns the Allentown Road property, but at R1, it is hard to develop, so no one is pushing them to sell. At R4, it becomes extremely attractive and Merck will get offers to sell. What are the commissioners and zoning board's plans for this corner property? And 3, what other development projects, both residential and commercial, are included in your goals for Upper Gwynedd Township over the next 2 to 5 years? Signed, Maureen Karshner, 753 Newport Lane, Lansdale, PA. And since I read it into the record, I'm not going to mark it as an exhibit. I would actually ask Mr. Van, if you could, for what it's worth, for purposes of the record, I would say that some of these questions are actually not really relevant to the proceedings that are here tonight. Certainly, the zoning hearing board does not set goals for the township in terms of development projects, nor does the zoning hearing board comment or consider potential development or variance requests that are actually not before it. So I don't believe questions 2 or 3 are relevant. Van, I'm not sure if you want to comment on number 1, other than to say that obviously each zoning application stands on its own merits, and there is no stare decisis when it comes to decisions by the zoning hearing board.
Patrick, yes, thank you. I did respond briefly to Maureen Karshner's review this afternoon. And on number 1, it's my view, based on a number of years of doing zoning and planning in Upper Gwynedd and probably in 100 other municipalities in Montgomery and Bucks counties, that this is not a map amendment. It is a request for consideration of a variance based on a finite facts pertinent to this 3 acres. The other sites that she asked about are much larger and located in such a way that, in my view, a decision on, we'll refer to it as JEPI, would have virtually no impact on, from a land use decision, no impact on a future disposition of, and I think she was focusing on the vacant properties that were kind of around the corner, let's say along Allentown Road. So that is my professional view of this application and its impact or lack thereof on those other properties.
Thank you, Van. The other comment, Mr. Chairman, and the board that I received notice of is the Van had actually received a telephone call from I'm going to terribly butcher this name, Bando Padare. It's spelled BANDYOPADHYAY. He lives at 1168 Canterbury Drive. And I would ask Van to briefly summarize his telephone call from this resident.
Thank you, Patrick. Yes, this is a phone call I received from Mr. B. March 9, 2021. He is a neighbor, not a contiguous neighbor, but a nearby neighbor at the far end of the cul-de-sac, probably closer to Kiefer's or adjacent to Kiefer's. And he wished that I would relay these 2 concerns that he had to the board. I've done so in writing and I'll read them now. 1, he is concerned about stormwater runoff and whether there is or will be any impact in his direction, which is just adjacent to the rear of Kiefer's appliance store. And second bullet, he is suggesting that the proposal is, using his words in quotes, a little too dense, close quote, and is recommending something more like 14 to 15 dwelling units instead of the 17 proposed in the plan. And I indicated, as I've indicated, I passed these comments along previously to Patrick and the board.
So, Mr. Chairman, those are the only 2 that I'm aware of. I don't know if Van has received any more or if we've received any tonight. So you can certainly go ahead and proceed with that.
Okay, thank you. All right, can we go ahead and I guess, would we let people in to do public comment? How does it work, Foster Digital?
Yeah, so that would probably be the most efficient way to ensure that everybody's had an opportunity who may be in the waiting room to provide public comment. So I would ask at this time to make sure everybody's allowed into the room to provide public comment if they would like to provide public comment.
Okay. Yeah, I was sorry. I was asking, Foster Digital, can you let anybody in the room who has public comment?
We currently have no public comment.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. Ms. Carney, do you want to go ahead and do your closing statements then?
Yes, just briefly. With the variance, we have to look at if there's a unique situation, and I believe we have a very unique situation based on the history that John Kennedy and Chris Canavan explained, and a very unique location. As I think Van said, this is really a very site-specific issue. There's finite facts on which you are granting the variance. We consider it the property's an orphan piece as it relates to zoning. Because of what has gone on, the Merck expansion, the realignment of the road, this piece is really not zone. We call it the dead hand of zoning. The zoning has been there for years and everything around it has grown up, expanded, realignments, things have happened, but it has remained zoned R2 and it just doesn't work for the property. So we do believe we have a very unique situation with the history and the location of the property. The property cannot be reasonably developed as zoned, as all 3 witnesses have indicated. Mr. Canavan indicated they have worked for years on being able to develop the property for what it should be developed for, because it really can't be developed for R2. The hardship was not created by the owner or the applicant. It really has been an issue of everything growing up around it, specifically Merck and the realignment of the road. So the applicant nor the owner have created the hardship. we have attempted to address the zoning, and as we had indicated, the Town Pike Overlay District was one of those attempts, but it hasn't been applied to this property at this time. And as time has gone on, Chris has worked with the township and the neighbors to come up with a viable plan. As I indicated in the beginning, we had come before you, we had filed an application, and we're going to come before you for 24 apartments. Because of the concerns of the neighbors that they wanted a development that would be more owned by homeowners. We came in with you, we reduced the number of units and are coming into you today with 17 townhomes. We believe we're asking for the minimum to afford relief, and we are developing the property residentially as it's zoned. It's just that the townhomes are not permitted in the R2, but it is residentially zoned. We don't believe will adversely affect the surrounding uses or the public health, safety, and welfare. There's residential in the back, as Mr. Kennedy had indicated in his testimony. This is a transitional use that's appropriate for the surrounding uses, which include institutional, residential, MERC, and commercial. And as indicated by all three witnesses, the developer, the applicant came up with an economically viable proposal of 17 townhomes, which we believe is appropriate and is a transitional type of zoning for this specific property. One of the neighbors was concerned about, well, what happens with other properties? As Mr. Rieger had indicated, it's specific. We're asking for specific relief for this specific property that has very unique characteristics, location, access, and history. So we do believe we meet the intent and requirements of your zoning ordinance in order to request the use and dimensional variances that we're requesting this evening. And as indicated, Mr. Heleniak is here on behalf of the township to support the application, which I always think is a good indicator that how hard Mr. Canavan has worked to make everyone happy with the requested zoning relief that we are asking for. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now that everybody has been given an opportunity to comment, I just want to make sure, does anybody else have anything else to say before we go ahead and close this hearing? Okay, so hearing none, I will now go ahead and close this hearing. Do we want to just go ahead and make a motion here, or do we want to go into executive session to deliberate here?
I move that we go into executive session.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I second it. Bobby wants it.
All right. So we have a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of deliberation, and we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, the ayes have it. So we are going to go into executive session. So it's still early. So my hope is that we can come to something tonight. If during our deliberations we realize we're not going to be able to, we'll come back and we'll let you know. But like I said, so we are now in executive session for the purpose of deliberation. So members, just remember to please mute and turn your cameras off, and then we'll go ahead and discuss this.
And so the record is aware of the telephone call number in advance of
Okay. Let's see. Okay, it looks like I see everyone. Okay, Mr. Hitchens, would you like to read so if we were to approve this, would you like to read a proposed motion that we could present if we were to approve this?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. If a member of the board would like to make the following motion, on hearing application number 20-07 for Carmichael Associates LP of 404 North Sumneytown Pike, Suite 200, North Wales, PA 19454 for properties located at 779 Sumneytown Pike and 783 Sumneytown Pike, to approve a variance from section 195-12A to permit 17 townhomes on the properties with 60 parking spaces in accordance with the site plan revision dated January 14th, 2021, as well as relief from the associated setback requirements internal to the proposed site as reflected on the same plan, as well as relief from section 195-60 to allow the approval to be approved rather than 1 year for 2 years in accordance with the testimony and exhibits presented by the applicant.
I make a motion as, oh, sorry, Mark, it's your turn.
Go ahead.
I make a motion that what Patrick just read, we accept and approve.
Seconded.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor, and then we have a second. So all in favor, say aye and raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. So the motion, as just stated by Mr. Hitchens, is approved. All right.
So Mr. Connolly, if I could, just for the record's sake, so because there was a additional party to these proceedings, I am required by the MPC to prepare a written decision in this case. I have to provide a copy of that to Ms. Kearney as well as to Mr. Canavan as the applicant. And Mr. McMullen, you will also get a copy of that decision as well. Unless you have any objection, Ms. Kearney, by my calculation, is due 45 days from tonight. Would you agree with me on that?
Yes, I would agree.
And so that decision will be prepared and then mailed out to those respective individuals.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Hitchens. All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
I second the motion.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
And thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate
Thank
the
you
time.
very much.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
Have a great night.